Hell, this is Greg Allison with Green Greg's. I've got a special guest today, Steve Poplar with the Poplar Report. Steve Poplar has got a real good channel on YouTube. I encourage everybody to go see it. I'll put the link below. He's an economist by trade. He covers a lot of good prepping topics, and he's covered a lot of good stuff recently on potential food shortages, the kind of things we're facing, what's coming at us, the economic challenges we see. So he's one of my favorite channels. I do watch Steve quite a bit, and he's very informative. So I encourage everyone to check it out. Steve, how are you doing today?
Hey, Greg, I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. So tell me, Steve, what do you see as the primary challenge with the economy coming at us right now?
Well, I think like you've said so many times too, it's just we just have so many people just sticking their heads in the sand. I mean, if you ask any economist about things that are going on, and they'll just bob their head along with basically everything you say, and but then they'll at the end they'll say, "But everything will be fine." And I think that a lot of people just don't want there to be anything wrong. And so that wishful thinking is really our biggest challenge, is that people kind of know that there's a lot of wealth inequality in America and the rest of the world. They know that there's problems at the food. I mean, they go to the store and they look at the shelves and they're like, why isn't there enough milk? Why isn't there enough rice? Why is this? Why is that? And but then they hear a little something from the media, or someone tells them, oh well, it's going to come back tomorrow. And that's where people are. It's just like, if we truly saw the problems that are staring us in the face, we could work together to solve the problems.
Amen.
But we're not doing that. We're just, everyone wants to go to the store and buy all their food. They don't want to grow anything. They don't want to work with local farmers. They don't want to stop getting their production from China and start getting their production from Mexico, or a state that's a little more friendly to the US. We just have all this money just being poured into the enemies of the United States. I mean, these countries want to bring our downfall, and yet we still want to pretend like they don't want to bring our downfall. And I think that just we're asleep and we don't want to wake up. I think that's the biggest problem.
I think part of that is the corporate greed aspect of it. Now, like Elon, he seems to be pretty pro-American and fairly conservative in many regards, but he's all in love with China because so much of his production is based there. It's clouded his vision, I think. But when you look at it this way, when Clinton made China the most favored trading nation, and then Walmart started cutting so many deals with them, they were telling American manufacturers, if you want to sell to us, you're going to have to put your plant in China. That actually happened. I heard a report from Rubbermaid talking about that years ago. And so what's happened is, by buying all our cheap junk from China, we built the world's largest Navy over there.
Yeah. It's not going to be many more years before China is going to make a brand called Tesla vehicles, electric vehicles, and it's going to work exactly like the Tesla vehicles. And Elon's going to be surprised at how they ever possibly figured out how to make them.
It's claimed now that they've got an electric vehicle that's cheaper than any car would buy over here. Although this also, if you see reports, their cars are notorious for going into thermal runaway, where those lithium-ion batteries catch fire, and each one is like a little blowtorch. They've got enough oxidizer in the cathode to basically fire up 15% of the electrolyte without any outside oxidizer source. So everyone's just a little bomb.
Yeah, when you look at the fire departments talking about how to put these cars out, it's like they literally have to submerge them for a couple hours in water. Like, if they're just spraying with water, they just have to literally keep spraying them for like over a day. They literally need to submerge them completely for over an hour in water to fully extinguish an electric car. It's ridiculous.
It's really a chemical fire, electrochemical fire. It's got the worst of both aspects. It's very difficult. If you got one of those in your garage and it goes off, your house goes up. People are charging these cars. The most dangerous time is when you're charging them. And so I would not want to charge one of those in my garage. I'll tell you that. I wouldn't want it close to a valuable building. I didn't think I'd want to park one in my garage because a lithium-ion battery can go in thermal runaway just by sitting on a shelf. They're inherently dangerous.
That really gets to one of the problems we have in America, especially in the West in general, is that people just aren't willing to ask questions. Like they're not willing to ask simple questions. Everything has to be, this is either the best thing in the world or this person is perfect. And we cannot accept any criticism of this person or this thing or this idea. There can be no qualification. There can be no nuance to anything. We cannot be like, these cars are really cool, but they're dangerous. We need to work on the safety. It's no, electric cars are saving the planet and therefore everyone needs to have them. It's like, yeah, but they're kind of like a death trap. Could we like make them a little safer? And they're like, well, stop it, you heretic. Don't you want to save the planet? And it's like, well, you know, I don't litter out in front of my house. I don't litter anywhere. I go along the street and pick up trash like good people do. You know, I want us to have a nice, prosperous, green, luscious, productive land everywhere. I love forests. I love going for a hike out in the woods. You know, I'm all about that. But I don't understand how strip mining whole mountains to rip out lithium and having slave labor pulling out the minerals out of Africa is really necessarily good for the planet. I think that there should be some questions asked along the way of human rights and all these things. But
well, they don't want to ask the same thing with the solar panels we're getting from China. They're made with slave labor from Uyghurs, and that's a very oppressed people right now. So, and you know, they're only good for 25 years, and you know, the resources and energy it takes to make them. Oh yeah, and they're burning coal to run the power to make these and dirty coal is what China uses to make these solar panels. So, you know, it might look good on paper, you know, when we get it over here, but if you can see the source, it's not good. But our real problem is the vulnerabilities in the supply chain. We have a very delicate supply chain issue worldwide. And we saw the first signs of weakness in it when the cerveza bug, that's what I call it for now, broke out. And but it's always had vulnerabilities. Now that we're facing potential war, we could have a cessation there. He can talk today, but we're just not getting anything. You know, China could totally cut off supply. And we're talking about embargo on them, but it could work two ways. We get more stuff from them than we send to them. So there's a big risk here. Like our medical supplies, think about this. Even if you're getting supplied like pills from India, the root materials for that is coming out of China. China could shut that stuff down, especially in a war. So we are.
I think it's something like 90% of Americans' prescription drugs, the precursors or some components of that come from one country, China.
That's exactly
even though they get so even the ones that are made in the United States, a lot of the precursors and chemicals and stuff like that are made in China.
So we've allowed ourselves to be supplied by our enemy and financed by our enemy. It's kind of like you have to go to them and say, can I have a loan so I can buy the stuff from you to make a bullet to shoot at you? I don't know, somehow that don't seem too wise.
Anytime in the next couple of years, China's going to move into putting a blockade around Taiwan. Yes. I don't know if they'll try to sneak in a ground invasion or not, but at the very least, they're going to put a blockade around Taiwan. At that point, are we going to be trading with China anymore? We're not. We're going to lose our trade partner Taiwan, which means there goes all of our computer chips.
Yeah.
But then in addition to that, we're not going to be able to buy anything from China either. I mean, you saw how fast and radically Europe was forced to cut all their supply chains to the country. I call them bear country in Europe, the big country there that we're not allowed to talk about. But they were forced to unload assets. They were forced to sell whole companies. They were forced to sell billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars worth of assets. And I think that when we get into a shooting war with our with the dragon country over there, I think that we're going to be seeing the very same kind of harsh dictatorial kind of chop down. And if you have, if you're Dollar Tree, you're going to have to find a whole new supply chain overnight. And I don't think anybody's looking at that in a realistic perspective. Everyone's like, oh, well, we might get into a conflict with them in the next couple of years. But then it's like, well, then why is everyone still completely reliant on their supply chains upon those countries? Like, where's the contingency planning?
Just think about this. You may think, okay, well, we got this factory down here and they're making these widgets for us, so we're good. But when you get down to it, you discover that the roller bearings that factory uses to convey everything are made in China or something like that. And without those, the factory shuts down because they don't have the components they need to operate. So our supply chain is a lot more vulnerable than people think because they're the basic little root elements. So much of the stuff we use on a day-to-day basis, so much of the stuff that is made uses so much components and materials from China. It is mind-boggling, even in our power grid today. And so
I think it's 60% of the world's steel is made in China.
Yeah, what are we going to
steel? I did a video a while back about how much the shipbuilding is made in China. The ships, most of the ships in the world are made in China.
Yeah, and also a lot of the pig iron, which is a source material for making a lot of good steel, comes out of Russia and Ukraine, and that's not available to us anymore. Not from Russia because, well, we got those embargoes, and Ukraine is their industry's laid flat by the war. So I get followers who are there for this country or that country, and but in the final analysis, when you look at it just from the supply chain standpoint, we're in trouble either way. There's no good way out of it.
When we start talking about fertilizer, I keep reminding my audience of this, that fertilizer can make plants bloom, but it also makes things go boom. And the fact that that both Dragon Country and Bear Country over there make so much of the fertilizers, and they're not exporting them anymore. What are they using all the fertilizer for? Are they just growing plants, or are they making things that go boom? And the fact that we need their precursors in order to make our things that go boom should scare the living daylights out of anybody.
Yeah,
half the stuff that we're sending over to our ally country over there in Eastern Europe have components that were made in China, have components that were made and have chemicals that came from other countries. That's just ridiculous, and we can't even rearm ourselves. We're running out of smart missiles, running out of smart bombs. The GPS guided stuff, our stockpiles are really low, and we're finding that we can't manufacture them fast enough. We're not fighting the guys in caves anymore.
If you're the head of Dragon Country, you'd be pretty happy with what's going on in Europe because, well, we're depleting our stocks, and it's going to take us years to replenish. So if they make a move soon, they already said we only got enough stuff to last a couple of weeks at best on a lot of our critical systems. And a lot of our military thinkers thought that we'd have a fast war, but it does not look that way at all. That apparently was an error in their analysis. So the bottom line is we've got severe challenges in supply chain that threaten to flare up. We got severe challenges in the economy. What do you see as the biggest landmines in the economy, Steve?
The economy. Besides the fact that it's one big giant Ponzi scheme.
There's that.
we look at the fat cats in the U.S. economy, and we're like, how did they get so rich? Well, everyone put their money into the Ponzi scheme called the stock market. Everyone put their money into the Ponzi scheme called the housing market and the commercial real estate market, and these fat cats have cashed in already, and they're starting to walk away. And who's holding the bag? Ordinary Americans are holding the bag. Or people with retirement funds, IRAs, 401ks in the stock market. People are sitting there. The stock market the S&P 500 is at 22 times present day earnings. That's the price of the stock market. So priced into the market is that we will get as many earnings for the next 22 years that we're getting today. So there's not going to be any recession for the next 22 years. There's not going to be any depression or decrease in it's just, when you think about those numbers, you're just like, that is patently insane. Yeah. That is just, everybody expects there to be a recession in the next 12 months. Like everybody does. And it's just like, well, but that's not what's priced in the stock market. A lot of people, when the stock market starts going down, that's when people start paying attention. Once they lose 10, 15, 20% of their retirement funds or their stock accounts, that's when they start paying attention. When companies can't raise funds on the stock market anymore, and they start having to lay off tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of workers, that's when we start getting doom and gloom in the mainstream media. But by that point, it's already too late.
Well, you know, I got a good case in point. You talk about how all these fat cats got fat. Think about, I got a good case here. Virgin Galactic. You look at Branson, who started Virgin Galactic. They've not flown a single paying tourist yet. But, you know, because people were expecting it, their stocks went up at one time. Well, Branson knew that they were going to be in trouble, so he sold a bunch of his stock when it's high value. He made $1.6 billion off Virgin Galactic already just in selling stock. So he's already made his profit. He's made a killing off of it. $1.6 billion, and they're yet to fly a tourist. And I'll be honest, you know, I'm a rocket scientist. I would be really highly concerned about getting on that rocket. I know a lot about that particular rocket and that kind of rocket because I developed hybrid rockets, launched some high altitude balloons. I developed the Forerunner, their main engine system, 25 years ago. So, and I had guys that worked on it. In fact, one of my guys that used to work for me died in that cold flow test that blew up in Mojave Airport years ago. So Glenn May, God rest his soul. So this is, yeah, there's a lot of risk with that. I would be real reluctant to deal with it. The main thing I'm worried about is their wings. I hear they're cracked like eggshells. So I'd be really concerned about getting on that. You know, I'm supposing they're doing something to fix it. I don't know how good the fixes are. You go on their website, you don't see anything about it. You know, I'd be like, you got to show me something, get my confidence. I don't see it. But anyway, but people aren't that way. People just, their herd mentality, you know, something sounds good, whiz bang, they all run at it and throw their money at it, mob mentality, and think it's going to be great. But we'll see. I'm concerned. But that's just one example. That's all over the economy. That's just one that's close enough to me. I know what's going on there, but that's everywhere.
Yeah. People just aren't paying attention. And everyone who's watching this, I'm sure you know people that you've tried to talk to them about things and they just won't listen to you. They're like, no, you're crazy. No, everything's fine. Everything's going to be fine forever. And it's just like, have you not opened a history book ever? Like there are cycles.
We preppers have a word for this. It's called normalcy bias.
That's normalcy bias, and just we've erased history out of the schools, and the people that got history a while back, they've forgotten all of it. There's no conception of that there are hard times as well as prosperous times.
History is punctuated with hard times, wars, catastrophes. It's always occurred throughout history. The idea that we think we're immune to it today that's a sad thing that people aren't getting ready. We got to be ready. Our ancestors, at least, you know, they didn't need a word for preppers because that's how they lived. You know, and my ancestors all lived on farms.
Well, they listened to their ancestors back in the day, and their ancestors remembered the times where their times were hard. They remembered 10 years back when the harvest didn't come in and they got hungry, or when the winter storm blew in and they couldn't get to town to buy food.
Right.
And you know, anyone who didn't have enough food stockpiled to get through the winter at their house, they were a fool. They were a fool. They were a drunkard, lazy fool.
And they had problems. Well, my dad died at 3 weeks shy of being 99, just back in 2000. And he was he was a big fan. If you don't work, you don't eat. Well, he hated people that didn't work. But I got to tell you, he told me the hottest times he ever saw was in the 30s. He said it was hot back then, and he also said that he fought in World War II. He's seen all kind of stuff come and go. The Great Depression. He knew these things, and so he was very frugal. He grew a garden until just a few years before he died, and would put away a lot of stuff. I mean, that's the way people were. Where I grew up, everybody used to grow gardens. You don't hardly see gardens anymore, even out in farms. If it is, it's a small little patch.
Yeah, a lot of places you're not even allowed to grow food on your front yard, or
it's ridiculous. It's nuts. Hey, Steve, there's enough acreage and lawns. You could actually feed like 1.8 billion people just off the lawns of North America, 42 million acres of lawns. The whole idea that we don't have enough land to grow food and blah, blah, blah. You hear all this stuff. It's horse dovers. Which is
true.
So
We have the technology, and we just have this arrogance about us that we don't think that there ever will be hard times again. I've traveled quite a bit around the world, and I've visited a lot of countries. And one of the things I've constantly gone to, I've been attracted to places that have gone through really hard times recently. So when I was in Sarajevo in Bosnia, and I did the tour through Sarajevo. If you're familiar, if folks, I know you're familiar, but if your viewers are familiar with what happened when the Serbs came in and they just their army just encircled the city with all the civilians inside of it, and they just choked off all supplies to the city, and they just basically tried starving out the whole city. And one of our tour guides she was a girl that grew up in Sarajevo and she was pointing out buildings. There were snipers in that building over there. So when we crossed this road here, we had to run, and you had to zigzag to get across the road. And I've been to places like off the top of my head, I'm blanking on it now. The killing fields of Cambodia. Yeah. I went to the killing fields of Cambodia, and the torture prisons they had there, where they would bring people in and torture them and get 10 names out of them before they were sent to the killing fields. And they tortured them until they gave them 10 names. Then they'd go and drag those 10 people in, and they get those people to give them 10 names. And it's just like going in after civil wars. And just one of the things I just kept hearing over time and time again, we never thought it could happen here. We never thought it could happen here. And I've heard that expressed in so many ways by dozens and dozens of people that I've talked to who have been in these conflict zones. And friends, if you don't think it could ever happen here, we're due. We're due. Because there's something to be said about if you fear and prepare, then you're more likely to not experience what you fear. But if you refuse to prepare, just think about it. Like if you have if your spare tire in your car goes flat, and you just kind of keep putting off replacing it or getting it patched or whatever, how likely are you to have a flat now? Significantly more likely than if you got the stupid thing patched and you're ready to go and you have all your emergency supplies, right? Because even if you do have a flat, when you have prepared, it doesn't seem like a big deal. It's a 15-minute inconvenience, and it's almost kind of like an affirmation that you took care of things, and it's not a big deal. But if you're not prepared, then now it's a catastrophe. Now it's an all-day disaster.
Tell me about, what do you think about the food situation? We talked about fertilizers on here. So I don't remember if that was in our pre-show chat or what, but we've got a lot of fertilizer challenges, the supply chain challenges figuring into it. And then when I was in grammar school, I remember reading a report that said the last 100 years was the most climatic stable period in the history of mankind. We never seen a period this stable, and our modern agriculture is built on. Now that we're having oscillations, everybody blames it on this, that, and the other, but oscillations in climate were the norm. And it's hard on big agriculture. We just seen in China where they had their rice crop flattened by heavy rain. And you've talked about peach crops in Georgia and a lot of other things. Where are we at in food supply?
I just was working on a video actually that's going to come out, I think, shortly. But basically, we're looking at we've allowed our grains like rice, corn, wheat, our stockpiles to be traded like stocks and bonds by bankers. And we're at a place where farmers don't control our food supply. Bankers do. And that's really scary, because now we can have a stock market crash of wheat and corn. And we're seeing the price of corn and wheat not reflecting the shortages that we're experiencing now. Now, are we going to run out of stocks of wheat and corn by next year? Probably not. But the fact is, when we lose 25% of the worldwide wheat crop, that's going to severely dig into the reserves around the world, because we don't have enough food. If we just stopped all food production around the world, the world would stop having enough food for people to eat within 180 days. So there is a lot of technology for growing food is miraculous. You talk to farmers these days about how their tractors, they GPS plot the soil on their entire farms. We're talking hundreds and hundreds of acres where when they go to spray fertilizer, they target the fertilizer to the weakest points of the field, the parts of the field that don't have enough nutrition in them for the crops. And just like the stuff that they do is just insane. They can get ridiculous prosperity out of the soil, but more and more of our soil is not being farmed by farmers. It's being sat on by people like Bill Gates and these businessmen from overseas who are buying up the land. And I was out in South Dakota just was it like six months ago, and the farmer there, he was pointing to fields all around him, and he's just like, they're not growing crops in those fields.
Wow.
It's just like, well, why not? And it's like, because, well, they've been bought up by multinational corporations, and nobody wants to pay the rental fees to rent those plots of land out that aren't developed. And just like we're seeing that all over the United States, and we're seeing that all over the world, is that farmers are getting squeezed. It's these food manufacturers, as I like to call them, like Kellogg's and stuff like that. They go out and they want to buy the corn up for as cheap as possible. And so they just want to squeeze those farmers really hard, and they use the bankers to drive the price of those corn and the wheat and everything like that down. And the farmers just like, it's not really worth it to really produce a lot at that level. And then they sell those manufactured food products to us at higher marked up rates, making a lot more profit that they can then turn over their shareholders, make the stock market go up some more. Friends, that is not you creating value. That's called stealing value. That's theft. It's not a productive thing to basically buy up all the food manufacturers and create a little monopoly or an oligarchy where we can sell
playing a big role in that. They bought it. What was it? Smithfield? What was the pork producer they bought out?
Smithfield, yeah.
Yeah, and then they told us during the cerveza bug outbreak, they said, well, we can't produce pork right now. We don't have it. Turns out they were shipping it to China hand over fist. They were producing it. And so, yeah, we're in a pickle. They're buying farmland over the world, by the way, in case anybody doesn't know. That's how they're going to make up their farming shortages in China, is they're actually buying farmland in other countries like crazy. So,
yeah, the world's wheat stockpile, I was just looking at this number today, is the lowest it's been since 2015. So the stockpiles of wheat, lowest since 2015. But if you actually take China out of the mix, you'll see that for the rest of the world, which includes the United States, we're looking at the lowest wheat stockpiles since 2003.
Wow. Well, that's not good.
And we have a lot more people in the world than 2003.
Well, you got to add to that, when you look at this flood they just had in Ukraine, what's that done? It's going to deprive irrigation upstream, and it's flooded crops downstream. So that's not helping. It's just, it's just one little thing, but it's added to.
And the ammonia pipeline just blew up, which was Bear Country was allowing that country in Eastern Europe to export grain in return for being allowed to export their ammonia. With that ammonia pipeline being blown up by these guys, that's putting the grain deal in jeopardy there too.
Ammonia makes nitrate. That's how you get nitrate, methane, ammonia, all the natural gas stuff. So the nitrate is what makes plants grow and turn green.
And makes things go boom.
Exactly, ammonium nitrate. And you got to worry about the potash and the phosphorus, and we're lacking all that stuff. So that's one reason I used to do a lot of organic gardening type videos for people to know how to take care of their own. You can go back and watch that stuff. I also tell everybody, buy local, buy from your local farmer. That guy needs your support. Spend your dollar locally. Vote. That's a vote. Every time you vote for your local farmer, you're helping them out. And also, I tell people to do that with tradesmen too. Go for the smaller companies, the mom and pop shops. Don't go for the big companies. You'll get better service. And That's what we need to do. And a lot of these big corporations they're not helping us at all. They don't care about us. So we got to keep that in mind. Eat natural foods as much as possible. All this processed food is killing us. It's bad for us in so many ways. It's also bad for the economy, and it empowers those that really don't care about you, in my humble opinion. So what's your final recommendations? What do you recommend that the viewer do about the economy?
Do you still sell worms? That's a question I have. Do you still sell them?
Yeah,
or have you stopped on that?
I've shut down temporarily. I may turn it back on soon. You bought worms from me in the past, haven't you, Steve?
I bought worms from you before I got on YouTube. Yeah, I watched all your videos on worm gardening. I was in an apartment at the time, so I didn't have anywhere to grow outside. So I tried doing worms in the basement, my unheated basement, and it was they didn't do so well. I didn't follow your instructions very well, though. So at some point, I probably should get another set of worm bins going again, because the amount of organic fertilizer you can get from those little guys is tremendous.
Yeah, turn your kitchen waste into something to grow your own food. Don't throw it away. You line clippings, cardboard, paper. You can turn it all back into something you eat instead of flushing it down the garbage or sending it to the landfill.
Yeah, I know a lot of people, they push back. I can't grow garden. I don't have room. I don't have that. Friends, go back on this channel right here and watch those worm videos. And you will see that you can, with just a little bit of space, if you have a basement, if you don't even have a basement, if you're in a mobile home, if you are in an apartment, you can grow worms in your home. And that's something that you can really make some potent fertilizer for, which you can sell to other people. That's my biggest recommendation, is become more self-sufficient and more reliant upon yourself and on people in your immediate community. Hey, if you can just find a local farmer or a local gardener, and you're trading them compost, worm compost, worms for their garden in return for some of their crop, it's like you're growing your own food. You're working with someone else to do it.
Also, if you've got a window, you can put pots in it. You got a front porch, a back porch, a stoop, anything like that. You'll be amazed what you can grow on your own. But still, the best thing to do is if you can trade stuff like that, that would be great. Yeah. An organic farmer would appreciate that. So yeah, that's a good deal. We're going to get to the point where all the cash is going to be that CBDC, and they're going to tell you what you can buy and can't buy. And this is one way around it. It's called bartering. But you got to have something to trade for to get something back. And that's a good suggestion, Steve. So that kind of combines the prepping, the gardening, the food, and the economy in one fell swoop. You're masterful, Steve. That's a great idea.
Now that's you need to have those relationships too. That's one of the big things that people overlook is, I mean, if you can stockpile all you want of trading goods, but if you don't have trustworthy people that you can trade with, those are people you need to find now.
Hey, I'm going to tell you one thing, Steve. I've discovered in the years I was selling worms, worm castings, and all that stuff, all these years, I've never got a single bad check from somebody that wanted to buy worms or worm castings, because the people that are doing that are trying to grow things. They're trying to do things. They're good, solid people. When your customers are that good and solid, you got nothing to worry about with your customers. Now, if I were selling handbags or shoes, I think half the checks would bounce, especially jewelry. But no, when you're selling something like this, you get really good, solid customers. So that's one thing you can look forward to. Stephen, I think you're a good, solid guy. You put out good, solid advice. Once again, I urge everyone, if you've never been to Steve Poplar's channel, check it out. I'll put the link below. Subscribe, bang the notification bell, and support Steve. And yeah, you can support me by going to prepwithgreg.com and get you some long-term food storage. And maybe I'll be selling worms again before too long if I don't up and move.
Yeah. And just to everybody, just I know that we sit on the side of the camera and everything like that, but the amount of work that Greg puts into this channel and into his research and into, you do like 2-hour long live streams with your people. I don't even know how you do that. I don't know how you find the time for that, Greg. I hope you all
of article research reading, and then you got to put them all up and sort them. Even
Yeah.
before you get started, there's hours and hours. A lot of days I do that work, but I just don't have time to do the video. And that's why I'm on like 2 o'clock in the morning. I don't get any sleep.
Yeah, I hear you on that. So I hope all of you really appreciate what Greg does for you guys. If you're part of his community, you know, find a way to support him. You know, make sure that when his videos pop up, watch the videos. If you want to watch them all the way through and then just skim that slider back and have it watch through them again, that helps things. Make sure you're hitting the thumbs up. Greg is good folk. And like I said, I've done business with him on the worm front back in the day, and I've really benefited from your wisdom and your hard work. So I want to say thank you, and hope everyone else appreciates you too.
All right. Well, thank you for that, Steve, and I appreciate you. You're a good, solid folk too. So anybody that buys worms got to be good folk. All righty. Everyone, I want to thank y'all for watching this show. Remember, like Steve said, give us a thumbs up on your way out and check my links below and go to his channel and support him. He's good folk too. So he's got the top of my recommendation. So Steve, thank you for being here. I'm going to hold on for just a minute after I stop recording. But everybody, again, thank y'all and share my videos, please. And with that, I'm going to say, Greg out.